Saturday night in Perth. Locals are out for dinner, maybe a dance. Tourists bounce around the city, seeing the sights. Others opt for a night at home, letting the food come to them. Then, a flurry of calls are placed to the city's emergency services centre. Members of Perth's Muslim community are concerned. Around the same time, just after 10 o'clock, a teenage boy calls 000 and makes his intentions known. He says he's going to commit acts of violence, but doesn't indicate where or when. A few minutes later, another call. A member of the public says someone's running around a car park with a knife. Officers are dispatched to a Bunnings store in Willetton, a small suburb in the city's south. There, a man lies wounded, stabbed in the back by a teenage boy. The boy, still wielding a large kitchen knife, clocks the police officers, rushes at them, impervious to warnings to drop the weapon. Tasers don't slow him down. A shot rings out. Within an hour of that threatening phone call, the 16-year-old falls to the ground and dies.
Our police responded within minutes. They encountered a very confronting situation, but their rapid and professional response kept our community safe.
That's Western Australian Premier Roger Cook. He disclosed the details of the violent attack in a press conference on Sunday morning, along with the state's Police Commissioner Col Blanch.
It's a very tragic event in Western Australia. It saddens me that I have to be here today talking about this incident.
So far, the picture that's being built is one of a 16-year-old who had been indoctrinated online over the past few years and who in fact had been on the radar of authorities for quite some time as well.
Paul Garvey is a senior reporter with The Australian. He's based in our Perth bureau.
Police Commissioner Col Blanch explained to us this morning that this boy had been in a special deradicalisation program for the past 2 years, involving psychologists, police, educators, faith leaders. There had been deep and ongoing concerns amongst some of the parents at this boy's high school around some of the behaviours that they were seeing, not only from this individual, but by a small cohort of boys inside that school. We've been told from a number of sources that parents had taken steps of contacting not only the school and the education department, but also higher up the chain to police and to the federal police and to relevant local and federal MPs, and specifically the idea that this group were actually trying to actively recruit more people and push more young boys down this path. But the school itself is also, it should be pointed out, considered one of the top public schools in Western Australia. It's a school that people spend a lot of money buying homes within the catchment area so their kids can go there. It attracts a very broad multicultural population, and that area in itself has a higher than average Asian and Indian population, but the high school itself is even more pronounced in that regard. So the boy in this incident was Caucasian as well. So it's left a lot of people, I think, a bit sort of surprised or confused as to how we actually got to this sort of point inside such an outstanding school with such a strong academic record, that this sort of mindset could foster itself in that sort of environment.
WA Police Commissioner Col Blanch said on Sunday he believes the teen attacker was a lone wolf. For that reason, he's been reluctant to use the T word, terrorism.
I believe this is a person acting alone. I don't need additional capability at this time. Whilst it meets the criteria, or at least the definition, that's something that we can work towards as we find out more information from the motivations behind this. It would be too early for me to act now because I don't have the concerns of a broader network that might be involved.
Generally speaking, the cops officially designate an incident a terrorist attack when it unlocks special investigative powers like surveillance and raids. But because WA Police believe the attacker acted alone in this case, there's no need for that extra help.
He said that's quite clearly got all the hallmarks of a terrorist attack, but the formal declaration of that is one which is made when people feel there's a need to trigger deeper, broader support and resources. So At this stage, given the confidence that this individual was acting alone and unlike the recent Sydney stabbing, wasn't part of a broader network of like-minded individuals, has prompted the police to not go ahead and formally declare this as a terrorist attack, even though it certainly has all the indications of having been one.
And do you think that's something that could change given what we now know about this cohort at the school?
It's a good point, and it may well be something that gets explored over the coming days, because certainly amongst the parents that we've spoken to today, there were deep concerns that this was much more than just one boy acting on his own.
On Sunday morning, after a briefing from the country's top spy, ASIO Director General Mike Burgess, and Police Commissioner Reece Kershaw, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese sent his well wishes to the Perth community. The PM said on the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, that Australia is a peace-loving nation where there's no place for violent extremism. On the ground in Perth, Paul says the gravity of the situation is setting in.
Yeah, it's not the sort of story that West Australians expect to find themselves in. This is not typical Western Australian behaviour. We see ourselves as being largely immune to this sort of thing. We obviously have a rich multicultural population, but it's one where we consider ourselves to be removed from that kind of extremism that pops up in other parts of Australia and the world. So I think this well and truly removes any doubts that may have been there about whether Western Australia was in fact different. You know, we have to wake up and accept now that we are part of a truly global issue.
Premier Roger Cook and Police Commissioner Col Blanch heaped praise on the people who contacted police to share their concerns about the teenage boy.
Members of the WA Muslim community who were concerned by his behaviour contacted police prior to the incident, and I thank them for their help.
There's been a few statements coming through so far from that community. The first and most important point that they're making is that Islam is not a religion of violence, it's a religion of peace. And then also statements of support, which are quite important at this point in time, around the actions of police, and then also the actions of the Muslim community itself. So in that side of things, it's a really positive, perhaps, aspect to this story that there was that immediate action and there was that comfort and trust from the community to raise the flag immediately and say, look, we're concerned that something may be going horribly wrong here.
Coming up, why we're hearing this story more and more. Our subscribers are the first to get this kind of breaking news and detailed analysis. They also have access to newsletters, live events and lively commentary around the clock. Check us out at theaustralian.com.au. We'll be back after this break. In mid-2022, when cities around the world were gripped by pandemic-era lockdowns, two women, Bieber Henry and her younger sister Nicole Smallman, met in a park to celebrate Bieber's 46th birthday. Days later, their bodies were found hidden in the scrub not too far away. Both had been violently stabbed to death. Their killer, 18-year-old Daniel Hussein, targeted Bieber and Nicole at random after making what he believed was a deal with the devil. Hussein was known to police. He'd been enrolled in an anti-radicalisation program since he was just 15. And yet he was able to carry out what he called a crusade of violence, essentially in plain sight.
Sentence has just been handed down at the Old Bailey to a man who murdered two sisters in a park in North London last year.
Yes, Daniel Hussein, who is still only 19, was 18 at the time of these murders, has been given a minimum life sentence of 35 years. So 35 years for each of the two murders of Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry, her sister.
It's an eerily similar story to what unfolded in Perth over the weekend, with one key difference. The victim stabbed by a 16-year-old boy in a Bunnings car park is recovering in hospital, where he's in a serious but stable condition. It's raised questions about the effectiveness of de-radicalisation programs like the one the Perth attacker was enrolled in. Here's Paul Garvey.
The Police Minister, Paul Papalia, made a really important point, though, that while these programs are used around the world, none of them are fail-safe, and that none of them have 100% success. And quite clearly, this seems to be one of those cases where that program hasn't achieved what may have been hoped for. Paul Papalier's main point was that you need to have a system in place, and that a system is certainly better than no system when it comes to these sorts of individuals, but that it is a deeply complex and difficult area to work in, because it sounds like in this particular case as well, there was more than just the indoctrination part. There were mental health concerns as well. And so it's never as simple as one thing that needs to be addressed here, that it's a deep and complex and intertwined set of factors that go into leading an individual to take this sort of horrific action.
It's a sentiment echoed by Minister for Youth Anne Ali, who told The Australian that it's vital we persevere with these types of programs if we're to get on top of our growing radicalisation problem. The Perth incident follows a run of violent attacks on the other side of the country. In April, 6 people were killed and 12 others were injured in a stabbing spree at Westfield Bondi Junction in Sydney's eastern suburbs.
As the nation reels from Bondi's mass stabbing, police are probing whether Joel Couchy's actions could have been premeditated.
It's not known if Couchy was driven by a particular ideology, but he appeared to be targeting women. Just 2 days later, an Assyrian Orthodox bishop was stabbed by a teenage boy during a service that was being live-streamed. The incident prompted a riot in suburban Sydney and was swiftly declared a terrorist act. A group of 6 teens were arrested and charged with a range of offences relating to the attack.
A Sydney mother has cried in court as her 15-year-old son was denied bail. The boy's parents left court devastated after a magistrate refused to free him, saying that there was no doubt they loved him, but public safety was paramount.
So is this happening more, or is the violence escalating, or both?
Look, I would think it would be both of those things would be true here. We think about terrorist-related incidents in Australia. Really, we've been able to count them on not just one hand, but really 1 or 2 fingers for a long period of time. And yet here we are now in the space of a month having certainly 2 very serious terrorist-related incidents occur, and perhaps most disturbingly, both of them involving 16-year-old boys who just should not be going down this sort of path. It's quite staggering to think that there's such a mindset out there on such a scale that 2 16-year-old boys on different sides of the country would be compelled to act in this sort of way. And so I think it as I said before, it well and truly removes any doubt about whether or not these sorts of issues that so many other countries have been dealing with for so long are not going to pop up here, that they are, it's real, and there needs to be real concern amongst the community and amongst legislators around how we actually address these sorts of issues.
Paul Garvey is a senior reporter with The Australian. You can read all the updates from this developing story right now at theaustralian.com.au.